noise practices. Is that it? All right then. Don't worry, keep it. Hello, I'm Adrian Gallardo.
I'm Gustavo Muro.
I'm Eugene Wayne. I'm Richard Motto.
And we're here working at the Earth Science Department here at UCSB under our mentor, Lauren Simpkins, faculty advisor, Alex Sims, and with the help of our RA, Jason Murphy. And we're here to present to you today our findings of the Buena Vista Lagoon evolution by means of analyzing its coastal sediment.
So what is sediment? Sediment is actually the breakdown of inorganic matter through chemical weathering and time, usually by wind, water, and ice. And through time, these particles accumulate and they create layers. And after these layers form, well actually, I want to backtrack on that. I want to say, if you can imagine in your minds a giant boulder, through time, these boulders will become smaller sized particles, such as a pebble, and then eventually smaller stones, and eventually it'll end up as sand, and then silt, the smallest particle size, which is clay. On the screen here, you will notice the Buena Vista Lagoon. This is located in Oceanside, California, and this is the where our core sample that we analyzed. This is where it was taken from.
Now you may be asking yourselves, why would we be looking at a lagoon or a coastal region at all? And the reason for that is lagoons have the unique quality that they allow us to look at both marine and terrestrial climate changes over a certain period of time. Another reason is that lagoons are great for looking at sea level changes, and that was one of the pieces of information we were looking for in our data.
So by examining the sediment of coastal regions, we can see the changes in the environment such as climate change, rising sea level, and signs of catastrophic events such as fires, floods, and storms. For example, we can determine if a fire may have occurred in the area by the amount of charcoal we find in the sediment. And so by doing this, we can begin to reconstruct the geological history of the Buena Vista Lagoon.
Now sediment forms in layers. The deeper into the earth you go, the longer ago that those layers had accumulated or formed. And sediment forms at different rates depending on the location. And as you can see by the chart right here, going down about 100 centimeters or about a meter into the earth, you could potentially see 1,000 or even thousands of years of sediment accumulation. Now because this takes so long, all those different layers experience completely different climate changes, and they're all incredibly different. They all have completely different mixes of particle grain sizes, such as sand, silt, or clay. And we can look at all those differences and interpret them to try to identify what occurred when those sediments were first forming.
And our main goal will be search for patterns for the changes in the environment that could be traced back to 2,000 years ago. It recreates the geological evolutions, such as the formation of terrain or the changes in the sea level in Buena Vista Lagoon. And because of the scarcity of the sediments data in California coastal region, hopefully our findings will make some contribution to the scientists.
Now we had to take data from somewhere, and that data came with our samples, which we obtained from sediment cores. These sediment cores were provided to us by our mentor, and essentially what they are long cylindrical devices that are capable of extracting fairly well-preserved layers of sediment, which we would then take different samples from the various depths and then analyze those.
So one method we use to examine the sediment in the lab required the use of a microscope. We would take a cubic centimeter of sediment and look for things such as charcoal, microfossils, and other organic material like seeds. The reason we would look for microfossils and seeds was so we can use them as an age identifier and possibly determine the precise age of the sediment. However, our main focus was to look for charcoal in the sediment from various depths. The size of the charcoal would tell us how the charcoal may have traveled to the lagoon. For instance, charcoal that is 125 to 250 microns in size was transported by wind, whereas charcoal that is greater than 250 microns was transported by another water source, such as a river.
And then another method we use is using the particle size analyzer to measure the grain size. So by basically knowing the general grain sizes, we can tell that the specific types of sediment that it belongs to. So how does it work? So as you can see, here is the ray come from the laser. So the laser gets deflected when the grain passes through the laser, passes by the laser at a certain point, and we get the mean diameter of every single grain in our sample. And the computer converts such information into histogram with distribution versus its size. So here we have two random histograms with our sediment core that we are analyzing right now. So both of the graphs have their 100% distributions with the area that it has. So here you can see it reaches 11% with its distribution at nearly 1,000 microns, which has a greater size compared to the one down below, which reaches 4% at nearly 100 microns. But before we're talking about more into this data, I'd like to get to know more about the sediment's age. That is one of our main focus.
Now, how old is the sediment core? Well, we received research from Los Penasquitos Lagoon, and this is located 30 kilometers south of Buena Vista Lagoon. And specifically, we use the sedimentation rate. Now, to find the sedimentation rate, they had to date the oldest layer, whatever they could find, possibly a microfossil through radiocarbon dating, and they found the age of that layer. So what they did essentially was take the change in depth and divide that by the age. That then gives us a sedimentation rate. So we used our depth from our core sample, and we divided it by the sedimentation rate, and this gives us our age. Now, with the two methods described previously with the particle analyzer and the microscope analysis, we are then able to figure out what happened during that span of time.
So this data is basically configured by particle size analyzer. As you can see, it gives us the mean diameter and the depth of our core sediments, which the deepest we reach is 265 centimeters. And the age model on the left side of the graph, which you can tell the deepest we go, which almost corresponds to 2,500 years ago. So by using the particle size analyzer, we found out that most of our core sediments contains three main grain sizes, which is clay, silt, and sand. And the range of the grain size ranges from 0 to 3.9 microns, which is clay, and 3.9 to 63 micron, which is silt, and the rest of the 63 micron, that would be the sand. And because of the differences that we have with the grain sizes, we basically divided them up into three groups. And we will be using 4 of our main histograms that best describes the typical lagoon terrain to compare with our control sample.
So in order to find the origin and evolution of the lagoon, we first needed to have some control samples to compare our sediment to. These 4 control samples were given to us by our mentor. The first was taken from the swash, which is initially where the ocean water meets the beach. The second from the backshore, which is the main beach area. The third, the upper foreshore, which is the back part of the beach closest to the lagoon. And the fourth is the river, which leads into the lagoon.
And so this is our first part of our analysis. So we compared with our core sample with control sample. As you can see, it's pretty similar between each other. So the core sample is actually more likely to be river terrain. So based on the range that we have with our grain sizes, our core sample in this area mostly contains clay and silt. As you may wonder, with the peak and the trough that it occurs in here, so this is basically a typical sediments movement. So any strong currents or wind could have caused that.
So as you can see from the graph, there is a particular pattern in mean grain sizes, and we were able to compare this to the data from the swash. So we can make the assumption that most of the sediment from this time span had come from the swash.
Now this third section is very unique for multiple reasons. One is that it experienced both characteristics of a swash and a river. But the second, being a little more important, was it's not sudden, but dramatic changes. For instance, from here to about here, you can see that it's very consistent in terms of how it decreases. As the layers get older and deeper, you see a slight increase, a very gradual increase in mean grain size for the most part. Until you get to this point where you get a very dramatic decrease in mean grain size, increase, decrease, and then continues into a very gradual increase again. Now this was a little off and a bit of an anomaly to us. So it made us wonder what exactly happened at this point to cause this.
So this is it. This is the lagoon reconstructed. The whole evolution of it is what we've been all waiting for. But honestly, this is just approximate. Nobody was there to see this take place, so we can only estimate what happened. And remember, this was just one core sample that we analyzed. So up here underneath the fish, you can see the first layer sample. This is mud, the mud layer, and this consists of mostly silt and clay. And through microscopic analysis, we were able to find microfossils in that sediment. The next layer is the sand flat, and microscopic analysis revealed pieces of oxidized iron. And this led us to believe that perhaps during this time period, which is 400 years to about 1300 years ago, that it was exposed or it was part of an extended beach area. And from this next layer, which was, if you remember the switchback and the graph and the third graph on the bottom, we named this part the central lagoon. And this contains both fine sediment and coarser grain sediments. And this is from 1300 years to about 2500 years ago. And below that, we're not sure because our core sample only went down to this far.
So our future research will still be taking place around this coastal region lagoon because we still need more core sediments to analyze in order to validate our conclusions. And another focus will be accuracy. So we'll be looking at more into microfossils and charcoals by using Microscope in order to better understand the sediment's composition.
And it is at this point that we'd like to send a special thanks out to our mentor, Lauren Simpkins, faculty advisor Alex Sims, director Dr. Ophelia Guerra, all of our program coordinators and residence assistants, and in general, the entire Jack Ken Cooke Bridges Foundation for helping us and allowing us this opportunity to speak in front of you today.